Good morning, Theo, and thank you for joining us. Pope Francis was very much different from his predecessors. What do you think defined him as a pope?
Simplicity. Pope Francis believed in the message of the gospel, and he believed that that message was being of service. He became, if you will, the people's pope. During his 12 years at the head of the Holy See, he visited 68 countries, and a lot of these countries were outside the West. He was the first non-European pope in centuries, and he made it his mission to travel the world and to meet all kinds of people.
And Francis still, however, attracted criticism. He's seen as a reformer, but he also attracted criticism from a number of people within the church and also outside for not bringing about enough substantial reform within the church. Is that true?
That's an absolutely fair criticism. However, he never really promised to bring that much change within the church. When he was elected, because of his different style, he created a lot of hope, in part because of that simplicity. But it's a very, very tough place to reform the Vatican. And Francis, although he's not a transformational pope, has one extraordinary legacy, which is that he makes it possible for his successor to be one. He streamlined the career, he's made the church more inclusive, he's made the church popular again on the international stage. He's shown that the church can address urgent issues like social inequality and like climate change. And now the next pope, should they so desire, could perhaps be the Francis that Francis was not.
Yes, as you say there, the Pope was not afraid to speak out on world affairs, not actually unlike his much more conservative predecessor, John Paul II. Now, Francis spoke out on, for instance, migrant rights, climate change, as you said. He was also one of the few world leaders to call for an end to violence in Gaza as recently as his last address on Easter Sunday. And this made quite a few enemies for him, both within and outside the church.
Absolutely. Let's just say this, it's almost impossible not to make enemies when you're Pope, regardless of which side of the political aisle you are on. It's a place filled with rivalries and power. To come back to Francis, Francis is essentially a South American leftist, so he's skeptical of American power. He doesn't believe in foreign intervention, and as a Christian, he believes deeply in the value of peace. And we've seen that, obviously, in his call for a ceasefire in Gaza. He's also called for the release of the Israeli hostages. And moreover, he's always been on the side of ceasefires across conflicts. Even in the Russia-Ukraine war, many times he said that the war needed to come to an end. In a sense, it is his role as Pope. If a Pope started to say, hey, let's drop bombs and let's go to war, we would all be very, very worried.
Now, the recent Oscar-winning film Conclave has given perhaps a lot of people around the world an insight into what a papal election might be, and it perhaps gave a foretaste of what this conclave coming up might be as well. It was an ideological power struggle between liberals and conservatives. Is the Vatican likely to continue with Francis's perhaps more progressive reform, so to speak, or are we likely to see a power struggle with, more ideologically conservative factions within the church?
So I actually look into this for a piece in Foreign Policy magazine, which came out yesterday. And what becomes very clear is 80% of the cardinals who are voting in this conclave have been appointed by Francis. So we should conclude that they will be broadly in line with Francis's agenda. That's not to say they will be extremely progressive or extremely reformist, but they're unlikely to want to unwind Francis's legacy. So the arch-conservative people like Raymond Burke of America, who has ties to Steve Bannon, or someone like Robert Sarra, which French viewers will know as being a fixture on CNews and Europe 1, are unlikely to become popes. However, the question now becomes, is the next pope a status quo pope, somebody who just keeps it as it is, simmering, or is the next pope a true reformer, the kind of reformer Francis wasn't? And now really, I think, is a big question. If the Conservatives are smart, they'll throw their support behind a compromise candidate, somebody who might not go back, but will probably not go further either.
Now, is the Catholic Church, in a way, in a market competition for adherents? Like, given declining church attendance in the developed world and the rise of evangelicism elsewhere, is there a way, in the sense that they're thinking that the next pope might actually dictate how it might actually be able to accrue more faithful around the world?
I think the Catholic Church, ever since the days of the Reformation, has always been in a contest for the souls of Christians, if you will. And it's not simply the rise of the evangelical movement in America and in a lot of Latin America as well. It's also now with social media, the rise of various weird conspiracy theories, which can draw the faithful away. So the next pope, his first mission will be the same mission as any pope, which is to evangelize and to try and keep people within the church. And that's a tall order in the modern world. And there are two schools of thoughts here. There are people who say in order to do that, we need to go back to tradition. And there are other people would be more like Francis, who would say in order to do that, we need to make the church even more relevant to the modern times. And that's always a key battle in the heart of the modern church. Do you adapt to the times, or do you hold true to tradition?
Thank you very much for that, Theo Zinu, Research Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society in London.